Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. Today's video is for Isaac, who has a Synology DS220 Plus NAS and is experiencing some issues playing large video files on his Google Chromecast and is wondering if he needs a Plex pass. I would say yes. I've already responded in the thread that it will be beneficial to him, but I really want to show what's going on. And I have a test server on my DS1520 Plus NAS. And as I've mentioned before, I've moved my Plex server away from that NAS to an 11th gen NUC running Unraid for a better iGPU. But this is still a capable hardware platform. My DS1520 Plus NAS has the same 9th gen Celeron processor that Isaac's 220 Plus NAS has. Isaac hasn't mentioned if he's upgraded his RAM, but I threw a 16 gigabyte stick in my DS1520 Plus to bring it up to 20 gigabytes total. So what I've done is I've simulated not having a Plex pass. I have tone mapping turned off and I have unchecked use hardware acceleration when available. So let me switch to dashboard view of this test server. And what I've done is I've taken two movies that I've written myself, both 4K, and added it to this test server. But before I go there, let me go into a regular library, movie library. These are all public domain videos, so I'm not worried about showing them on YouTube. The bit rates are not high, and I'm just using the HTPC client app under Pop! OS, my Linux desktop. So let's force this into a transcode. Let's do 2 megabits per second 720p. Alright, I still have the video paused. And you'll see a smaller sized movie like this starts right up with a software transcode. If it was a hardware transcode, we know that right here with an HW. So my server is made up of this type of media. So that's not going to be an issue. Now I have this test movie, and I think I have different versions of it. But even so, the 4K version is only 10.5 megabits per second. This processor is not going to be able to handle AV1 media, but it is going to be able to handle a 4K H.264 or even an HEVC encoded video with a hardware transcode. It won't handle it with a software transcode too easily, but it just might. But let's test this. Alright, so the lead-in's there. Oh, it's already transcoded. It started up in a transcode because that's where I had it last. So this is the direct stream of that. You see it's being reported as 34 megabits per second. And we'll take that down to 4 megabits per second 720p. So it took a second to spin up, but it spun up. So again, it's not really hard to stream or transcode media even through a software transcode. Let's go to this. I can't see the bit rate until I start the video. And let's get more of the musical lead into it. So you see that started up really quickly because it's direct playing. It's an HEVC main 10 video. This client app is reporting it at 92 megabits per second, but this isn't always accurate across every place that might report it. So let me let it play, and I'll take it into transcode, and you'll see here this is being reported as 93.4 megabits per second. Let me take it into a 720p 4 megabit per second transcode. It's going to take a while, but not that long, so we've got a buffer, and it may buffer every 60 seconds or so, it may not. But the 9th gen Celeron processor without any hardware acceleration can still transcode this stream. It's really not that hard. It's turning it into HEVC, or from HEVC to H.264, and it just handles it. So the first thing I want to suggest to Isaac is that his LAN infrastructure might need to be improved with his client device. And he's using a Google Chromecast with Google TV. One option not to buy a Plex Pass is to buy a NVIDIA Shield, either the Pro or the Tube style, because they both have Ethernet connections on them. If your Plex server is connected to your router with a Cat6 cable, and your NVIDIA Shield is connected to the router with a Cat6 cable too, you'll have great infrastructure between your server and your client device. So that could be an option. And I'm not just saying the Shield because it's considered the best client app for Plex. I'm saying that because it has a gig Ethernet port on it. All TVs have a 100 megabit per second Ethernet port on it. The Fire TV cubes are limited with a 100 megabit per second Ethernet port. I don't know of any other streaming device that has the gig port. A Roku Ultra also has a port limited to 100 megabits per second. And now that's important. Let's get back into a non-transcoded play of this. Oh, it's still paused. This 192 megabits per second that's being reported is twice the limit of most Ethernet ports on streaming devices that have them. So right there, the infrastructure might make a difference to you. So now let's go back into hardware accelerated transcoding. Let me stop this stream, and we'll get back into the settings here. Enable HDR tone mapping and use hardware acceleration when available. Let me save the changes. And this is going to be tough. I want to make a comparison with my current Plex server as we get near the end of the video, but I have a friend streaming off my server, so I'll have to use another window and kind of shrink it. So we're back to the dashboard for this server. And now I'll start this up again right from the beginning so I get more of the audio lead in. And it starts just as fast. The hardware acceleration has nothing to do with anything at this point. Now we'll force it into that same 720p 4 megabit per second transcode. Now chances are there's not going to be any buffering of this movie, and I might be able to have 2 or 3 or 4 copies of this transcoded off my server before maybe a 4th or a 5th additional stream would start to buffer. And if we look down, the CPU usage is relatively low. The system is using 32% right now, but Plex server is using 15%. So this is what hardware acceleration will do for you. But again, let me pause this. But again, your local area network infrastructure will probably be just as important as the ability to transcode off the iGPU in the Celeron processor in your NAS. I'm not saying don't get a Plex Pass, it's great. There's a lot of other features that come with a Plex Pass. I like edition naming. I like to be able to name my files with the movie edition in them. And here's my Synology NAS with my test shared folder. And if I go into this folder, I don't have the edition tag on this. I know I have it someplace, so let me just try this. Okay, so this movie has the edition tag applied in the file name, and Plex will scan this in and add the remastered tag to the display of the movie automatically. So that's a feature I love. And of course you get DVR options with a Plex Pass. It's really worthwhile having. Okay, so what else can we do with this? There's not really any reason to transcode this low. It's a horrible picture. But the iGPU can do it. And I want to dispel any myths. Let me pause that. This part of the transcode is always on the CPU. So it's not very taxing, especially when the video is being handled by the iGPU. But this is added resources on the CPU when you're doing a transcoding on the CPU itself. So it adds up quicker, but with a hardware accelerated transcode of the video on the iGPU, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter at all. That's easy peasy to dispel that myth. And then the only thing else, let me do this. Let me start this video up again. Actually, let me keep it in the soundtrack or the musical interlude phase. Subtitles. PGS subtitles are going to screw everything up. But even with this heavily transcoded file, it's working. Because the bit rate is so high of the original file, this might help it to buffer. But even if you're ripping your own media and it only has PGS subtitles, go out and find SRT subtitles because they're the most wildly compatible. And everything will just work that much easier with that type of subtitles. So you can see the subtitle is direct streaming, even though the rest of the video is transcoding. And that only happens with SRT subtitles. And they're easy peasy to work with. If you're someone that only rips your own media, let me pause that, go back here. If you're someone that only rips their own media, you're likely to have your subtitles embedded in the container file. Well, go find a matching SRT subtitle at different places. You can integrate open subtitles into FileBot to pull a most likely matched one. It's not always perfect. And you just name it the same as your movie. You use a 2 or 3 character code for the language. And if this was excuse me, if this was an 8 SDH subtitle, I would add .sdh to the file name. If it was forced, I'd add that to the file name. So it's always the language code, and then nothing if it's the default subtitle, and then either SDH or forced if it's one of those subtitles. So subtitles are stupidly simple. But but only PGS subs can be troublesome because they're resource intensive. So let's do that again. Let's change to the embedded PGS subtitle. Well, even this PGS one is a direct stream, so it's not always that way, and it's client dependent, and I'm not sure what would happen on a Google Chromecast. So let me take this out of transcode. And I'm going to pause the video and turn my NVIDIA Shield on, and we'll test the same movie off the same server. It's an NVIDIA Shield tube that I have in my office, and I think it speed tests to my router at around 300 megabits per second. We'll see how that same movie does on the tube style NVIDIA Shield that's connected through the wireless network. I'll be right back. And I'm back. So I'm going to start the same movie on my tube style Shield that's connected to the Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz side of my TP-Link Deco router. Now, it didn't take that long to start up. It was faster on the HTPC client app. And let me rewind it so I got more of the audio lead-in, the musical lead-in. So the HTPC client app is more responsive, but that's over my gig network, hardwired network. So let's take this into transcode. We'll do the same 720p, 4 megabits per second. You see this switch pretty quickly. This hasn't caught up yet. The movie started. And now we're doing the hardware transcode. Alright, I'm going to turn it down a little bit, because as I talk, I want to let it run to see if it buffers at all. And actually, let's turn on subtitles. I'm not going to do the PGS subtitles on the Shield. Everybody knows that they're harder. Alright, so it started up fairly quickly, and there's really not going to be an issue. I have a bunch of experience with transcoding off this 9th gen processor. My first Synology NAS was the DS220 Plus NAS with a slightly older Celeron processor. That only had the HD Graphics 500 iGPU in it. And, well, I wouldn't want to buy a new NAS with that in it. It was still good enough when I bought my NAS in 2019 for Plex server, and we have members of the group still running that NAS or the 918 Plus right now, happily, and they can share with friends and family with that as long as they have a good outbound connection. I have gig fiber service, and it's perfect to share my easy to stream media with friends and family. Alright, so the movie started. I'm going to stop it. It didn't buffer off the NVIDIA Shield, forcing a transcode. All easy peasy stuff. So your connection to the outside world is really what determines how well you'll be able to stream any media. I share my small 4K collection with my son, who doesn't live that far away from me. He's stuck with Spectrum Internet, but he's got their gig service, so his upload is crappy, but his incoming is great. He'll watch a movie off my 4K library without any problems at all, and generally he's watching it on his Windows computer in the with the HTPC client app for Windows. He's got a big 40-inch screen, and it's kind of like his home and entertainment system. So you can share 4K media, but my regular server is built to transcode a lot of streams, and that's what we're going to go to next. So if I switch to this, and we go to the transcoder section, and I just flashed somebody streaming on my server, so I apologize. So my 11th gen i5 processor has the Iris Xe graphics in it, and that's wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that off the screen temporarily. Let's go back to the HTPC client app, and I'll go into my regular 4K library. I'll go into the collection view, and I have a little test collection that has the same 2 movies in it. Alright, so let me get back to the beginning, and I'll prep my dashboard window to just show my screen. So this is what a better iGPU gets you. Let's change to that same 720p 4 megabits per second transcode. It doesn't start up instantly, but it only took like a second to start up. Let's add in the PGS subtitles. Let's take this down to the lowest transcoding option. And again, nobody's going to watch this. Nobody wants to transcode down to that. Let me take it into more of a milder 4K transcode. So this is back to original quality, and let me go one more time to this. You'll see they're all hardware transcodes on the video file. And again, even with this better processor, the audio is always a software transcode. So it's nice to have a better iGPU. I made the move myself. And Isaac, in case you're interested in it, let's get rid of all this and let me pull up my little Unraid server on a NUC. So I'm using this Intel NUC. It has this processor in it, the 1135G7. I have Plex running in a Docker container. I actually moved my working Synology NAS Plex Docker container over to this platform without losing anything. Kept all my metadata. All my friends and family didn't even know there was a change, besides that the server is more responsive for them now. But they already have a little lag because they're remote. So you can get a Intel N100 NUC, which is another more modern Celeron processor, and the only difference is it's going to have a decent iGPU. Where's my iGPU? It won't have this iGPU, but it'll have a better one than what your Synology NAS has. So that could be another upgrade. If you upgrade to a 11th gen NUC, the Iris Xe graphics iGPU is our little rocket ship. I think an 11th gen regular i5 CPU, the desktop version, has the UHD 770, UHD graphics 770 iGPU in it, and this is the same performance. You don't need the desktop processor to get that same performance. So this system has 2 small 500 gigabyte drives in it, one NVMe and one SATA SSD. Together they're joined into a RAID 1 array, which Unraid calls a cache pool. Unraid boots off a flash drive, and Unraid can start if you have another flash drive to serve as the one required storage drive. I have no NAS array in this setup. I'm simply using Unraid as a Docker host to run these containers, which point back to my Synology NAS through this setup here. I have a test Jellyfin install, and I don't like Jellyfin at all, and I'll never do a video on it. This links to my shared folder on my Synology NAS where all my Plex media is, and this links to another shared folder for my channel's DVR media. So channel's DVR runs on this system and records back or plays back from the NAS, and Plex plays off media on the NAS. Easy peasy. So you can see my terabyte free and what's used on the NAS. And I just set a user that has access on the Synology NAS that then gets used in Unraid to access it, and it's not an admin user. So things are locked down pretty decently, and this is a nice way to extend hardware acceleration off a Synology NAS while keeping your media there. So you really have lots of options, and let me just recoup all that again. The first thing is infrastructure, network infrastructure. I don't know what your Chromecast is connected to, but it should be connected to the 5 gigahertz network. It shouldn't be that far away from your router, and a NVIDIA Shield, either one with the Ethernet port, can give you that gig connection on your local network, and that removes any barriers that you might have. But as you saw, my NVIDIA Shield, which speed tested about 340 megabits per second, has a decent connection to my LAN, probably more than that throughput. And then the next thing you can do is the Plex Pass is just wonderful for a lot of things besides hardware acceleration, and your DS220 Plus will benefit from that. And then if you move your server to better hardware, your media can stay right on your NAS. You've got a lot of options, Isaac, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I didn't realize this is still paused or running. What is it? It's paused, so I'll have to stop that. But yeah, you've got a lot of options, and Plex Pass is a decent one. None of my videos are scripted, so sometimes they sound a little disjointed, and all I care about is getting the information out to you, whether it's gotten to you as efficiently as a pro YouTuber might be able to do it. This works for me, and I hope it works for you. Happy Plexing.